Blood trickled down Matteo's Cavalcanti's temple as the world spun around him. The crumpled hood of his Maserati smoked against the guardrail, sirens wailing in the distance. Through blurred vision, he caught a glimpse of his phone. Clara's message still displayed on the screen. "Don't worry about tonight, darling. Take your time at the office. Love you." The same message that had sent him racing across town after he'd spotted her entering Hotel Majestic with Henrique. His hands trembled as darkness crept into the edges of his consciousness. In that moment, lying amid the twisted metal and shattered glass, a plan crystallized in his mind, one that made his split lip curl into a pained smile. "Perfect," he whispered, before allowing himself to slip into darkness. "Mr. Cavalcanti, can you hear me? Mr. Cavalcanti?" A soft voice penetrated the fog in Matteos's mind. He blinked slowly, the sterile white ceiling of the hospital room gradually coming into focus. The subtle scent of antiseptic mingled with a delicate floral perfume, unfamiliar yet somehow comforting. "He's coming around," the voice spoke again. Matteos turned his head slightly, wincing at the pain that shot through his neck. A woman in blue scrubs stood beside his bed, her chestnut hair pulled back into a practical bun, revealing a face marked by both compassion and something deeper, a shadow of past pain that he recognized immediately. Her ID badge read Sofia Oliveira RN. "Where am I?" Matteos asked, his voice deliberately uncertain as he forced his brow to furrow in confusion. He cleared his throat, allowing a slight stutter to enter his speech. "What happened to me?" Sofia's eyes widened slightly as she reached for the call button. "You're at São Paulo Memorial Hospital, Mr. Cavalcanti. You were in a car accident 3 days ago. I'll let the doctor know you're awake." "Cavalcanti?" Matteos repeated the name slowly, as if testing its unfamiliarity on his tongue. "Is that my name?" Sofia froze, her finger hovering over the button as she studied his face. "You don't remember?" Matteos allowed his eyes to dart around the room, panic rising in his expression. I can't remember anything. Who am I? Why can't I remember?" His voice cracked as he gripped the bedsheets, playing the role of a man whose identity had been stolen by trauma. Sofia's professional demeanor softened with concern. "Try to stay calm, Mr. Cavalcanti. Memory loss can be common after head trauma. The doctor will be here soon to—" The door burst open, cutting her off as Clara Sampaio rushed in, designer heels clicking against the tile floor. Her immaculate appearance, not a hair out of place in her golden blowout, makeup perfect despite the tears welling in her eyes, seemed oddly rehearsed to Matteos, now viewing his fiancée through new eyes. "Matteos, thank God you're awake!" Clara exclaimed, rushing to his side and reaching for his hand. Matteos flinched away, instinctively, shrinking back against the pillows with a confused expression. "I'm sorry, but who are you?" The room fell silent. Clara's perfectly manicured hand hovered in midair, her expression morphing from relief to shock. "What? Matteos, it's me, Clara, your fiancée." Matteos shook his head slowly, his eyes wide with feigned confusion and fear. I don't know you." Clara turned to Sofia, panic flashing across her face. "What's wrong with him? Why doesn't he recognize me?" "Miss Sampaio, please try to remain calm," Sofia said, her voice steady as she placed a gentle but firm hand on Clara's arm. "Mr. Cavalcanti appears to be experiencing amnesia. The doctor will need to conduct a full evaluation to determine the extent of his memory loss." Clara's perfectly composed facade cracked slightly as she turned back to Matteos, tears now flowing freely down her cheeks. "This is impossible. We've been together for 3 years. We're getting married in 2 months." Matteos watched her performance with veiled scrutiny. Were those tears genuine? Was that tremor in her voice real concern or fear that her plans were unraveling? He thought back to the text message, to the glimpse of her entering the hotel with Henrique, his supposed best friend. The betrayal burned anew in his chest. "I'm truly sorry," Matteos said softly. "I don't remember any of that." The door opened again, and Dr. Mendez entered, a serious-looking man with salt and pepper hair and wire-rimmed glasses. Behind him followed Henrique Tavares, whose confident stride faltered when he saw Matteos awake. "Ah, Mr. Cavalcanti, good to see you conscious," Dr. Mendez said, approaching the bed with a tablet in hand. "How are you feeling?" "See, confused," Matteos replied, noting how Henrique remained near the door, his expression a careful mixture of concern and, was that calculation in his eyes? "I don't know who I am. I don't recognize anyone. Dr. Mendez's brow furrowed as he glanced at Sophia, who nodded confirmation. I see. Let's run through some basic questions, shall we? As the doctor questioned him about the date, the president, and simple math problems, Mateus provided correct answers while maintaining his confused demeanor. When asked about personal details, he shook his head helplessly, his stutter becoming more pronounced with his apparent distress. Based on these initial observations, Mr. Cavalcanti appears to be suffering from retrograde amnesia, Dr. Mendez explained to the room. He's retained general knowledge but has lost access to personal memories. How long will this last? Clara demanded, her hand clutching her designer handbag so tightly her knuckles had turned white. It's difficult to say, Dr. Mendez replied. Memory loss can be temporary or permanent. Familiar surroundings, photographs, even scents can sometimes trigger memories to return. The brain is remarkably resilient, but also unpredictable. Henrique finally stepped forward, placing a comforting hand on Clara's shoulder that lingered just a moment too long. Perhaps being home would help? Surrounded by his things, his life. Dr. Mendez hesitated. Mr. Cavalcanti has suffered significant trauma. He'll need proper care during his recovery, physical therapy for his injuries, cognitive exercises, and someone to monitor his condition. I'll hire the best private nurses, Clara insisted. Actually, Sophia interjected, her calm voice cutting through the tension. In cases like this, we typically recommend a rehabilitation facility first, where Mr. Cavalcanti can receive specialized care before transitioning home. Clara's eyes narrowed slightly at Sophia. And you are? Sophia Oliveira. I've been Mr. Cavalcanti's primary nurse since he was admitted. Well, Nurse Oliveira, Clara said, her tone sharpening. Mateus owns one of the largest pharmaceutical companies in Brazil. I think we can manage his care privately. Mateus observed the exchange with interest, noting Sophia's unwavering composure in the face of Clara's condescension. There was strength in her gentleness, a quiet dignity that contrasted sharply with Clara's brittle elegance. Please, Mateus interrupted, his voice small but firm. This is all very overwhelming. Could I have some time to process? Dr. Mendez nodded. Of course, Nurse Oliveira will continue to monitor you, and I'll return later to discuss your treatment plan. For now, try to rest. He gestured for Clara and Henrique to follow him out. Clara hesitated, then leaned down to place a kiss on Mateus's forehead. I'll be back soon, darling. Everything will be all right. Mateus forced himself to remain still, though every fiber of his being wanted to recoil from her touch. As she turned to leave, he caught a glimpse of Henrique's hand resting on the small of her back, an intimate gesture that confirmed his suspicions. The door closed behind them, leaving Mateus alone with Sophia. You don't think I should go home? He asked as Sophia checked his IV line. Sophia paused, considering her words carefully. I think recovery is a process, not a race. Whether you go to a rehabilitation facility or home, what matters is that you're surrounded by people who genuinely have your best interests at heart. There was something in her tone that made Mateus wonder if she could see through his charade. Her eyes, a warm amber color he hadn't noticed before, seemed to look past his pretense, studying him with quiet intensity. Do you know me? He asked, intentionally dropping the stutter, testing her reaction. From before, I mean. Sophia shook her head, a sad smile touching her lips. No, Mr. Cavalcanti, but in my profession, you learn to read people quickly. Pain, fear, confusion, they're universal languages. Mateus held her gaze, momentarily forgetting his role. There was something disarming about her directness, her lack of pretense. After a moment, he remembered himself and looked away, re-establishing his confused demeanor. I feel so well lost, he whispered, the stutter returning. Like I'm drifting in someone else's life. Sophia adjusted his pillows with gentle efficiency. Memory or no memory, you're still you, Mr. Cavalcanti. The core of who we are, our instincts, our values, the way we respond to the world, that remains even when the details fade. She stepped back, gesturing to a small notepad on the bedside table. I left that there for you. Sometimes writing things down can help anchor you. As she turned to leave, Mateus felt a strange reluctance to see her go. Nurse Oliveira? Sophia paused at the door, looking back over her shoulder. Thank you, he said simply. She nodded once, her expression thoughtful, before stepping out into the corridor. Alone at last, Mateus reached for the notepad, flipping it open to the first blank page. His hand no longer trembled as he began to write, documenting what he knew, what he suspected, and what he planned to discover. At the top of the page, he wrote only 2 words: trust no one. In the hospital corridor, Clara pulled Henrique into an empty consultation room, shutting the door firmly behind them. "Amnesia?" she hissed, pacing the small space. "How are we supposed to get him to sign the merger papers if he doesn't even remember who he is?" Henrique loosened his silk tie, his composed facade slipping now that they were alone. "Calm down, Clara. This could actually work in our favor. If he doesn't remember the company, he'll have to rely on our guidance." Clara stopped pacing, a slow smile spreading across her face as she considered this. "You're right, we could reshape his reality completely." She stepped closer to Henrique, running her hand down his chest. "Tell him the merger was his idea in the first place." "Exactly," Henrique murmured, pulling her closer. "And once the companies merge, and his shares transfer, he'll be superfluous," Clara finished for him, her eyes gleaming. "But there's that nurse. Did you see how she looked at him? She's going to be a problem." "Leave her to me," Henrique said, his fingers tightening possessively around Clara's waist. "I've dealt with troublesome employees before." Clara laughed softly, the sound devoid of warmth. "This is why we work so well together." She pulled away, checking her reflection in the small mirror on the wall and reapplying her lipstick. "Remember, keep your distance from me when we're with him. One wrong look and even an amnesiac might get suspicious." Henrique nodded, straightening his tie. "And what about his recovery? What if his memory returns?" Clara's expression hardened as she snapped her compact shut. "Then we accelerate our timeline." She placed her hand on the door handle, her mask of devoted fiancé sliding back into place. "By the time Mateus Cavalcanti remembers who he really is, it'll be too late for him to do anything about it." Outside in the hallway, Sofia Oliveira stood frozen, a clipboard clutched to her chest. She had been about to knock on the consultation room door when Clara's voice had carried through the thin wood. Now she silently backed away, her mind racing as the gravity of what she'd overheard sank in. She glanced toward Mateus's room, understanding dawning in her eyes. His selective amnesia, the convenient stutter, the momentary clarity when they were alone, it all made sense now. Mateus Cavalcanti wasn't suffering from memory loss at all. He was playing a dangerous game, and somehow she had just become a player in it. The mansion gleamed in the afternoon sun, a modernist monument of glass and steel perched on the cliffs overlooking the Atlantic. To anyone else, this would be a homecoming. To Mateus Cavalcanti, it felt like entering an elaborate stage set. "This is mine?" he asked, deliberately widening his eyes as the sleek Mercedes pulled through the security gates. Clara squeezed his hand possessively. "Ours, darling. You designed it yourself 3 years ago. Surely something feels familiar?" Matthias scanned the manicured grounds, the infinity pool glittering like a sapphire against the horizon, the staff lined up at the entrance with practiced smiles. Nothing had changed in the week he'd been hospitalized, yet everything looked different through the lens of betrayal. "It's beautiful," he stammered, "but it feels like something from a magazine, not my life." Clara's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "The doctor said familiar surroundings might help trigger your memory. Just give it time." As the car stopped at the entrance, Matthias noted how the staff's eyes followed Clara with a mixture of deference and wariness. Interesting. Even they sensed something beneath her perfect veneer. "Mr. Cavalcanti, welcome home," said Rodriguez, the house manager, opening the car door with a formal bow. "We're all relieved to see you recovering." "Thank you," Mateus replied, allowing genuine warmth to enter his voice. Rodriguez had been with him for years, his loyalty never in question. "Though I'm afraid I don't remember you." A flash of concern crossed Rodriguez's weathered face. "It's all right, sir. I'm Rodriguez. I've managed your household for 8 years now." Clara cut in smoothly, taking Matthias's arm. "Darling, you must be exhausted. Let's get you settled in before you meet with everyone." As Clara guided him through the soaring atrium, Matthias took mental notes of security cameras, exits, staff positions, details that an amnesiac wouldn't notice, but that he couldn't afford to ignore. If Clara and Henrique were planning to take his company, he needed to be vigilant. Your rehabilitation nurse should be here soon, Clara said, leading him to the master suite. Though I still think it's unnecessary. We have staff. Miss Oliveira is highly recommended. Mateus interrupted, suppressing a smile at Clara's poorly disguised annoyance. He had specifically requested Sophia to oversee his home care, partly because he trusted her competence, but mostly because he suspected she had discovered his ruse. Having her close allowed him to either confirm her as an ally or neutralize her as a threat. Yes, well, Clara sniffed, opening the bedroom doors with a flourish. Here we are, our sanctuary. The master suite was exactly as he remembered. Minimalist, dominated by a platform bed facing floor-to-ceiling windows with breathtaking ocean views. What caught his attention, however, were the subtle changes. Clara's possessions had migrated further across shared spaces, her perfumes now dominant on the vanity, her books on his nightstand. She was erasing him, inch by inch. I'll let you rest while I check on lunch arrangements, Clara said, kissing his cheek before gliding toward the door. The doctor said not to overwhelm you with too much at once. As the door closed behind her, Mateus dropped the hunched posture and confused expression he'd been maintaining. Moving with silent efficiency, he began a systematic search of the room, checking behind artwork for safes, examining the underside of drawers, and scanning for surveillance devices. His fingers brushed against something beneath the bedside table, a small transmitter, professionally installed. Amateurs, he muttered, leaving it untouched. Better to know where the surveillance was than disable it and alert them. A soft knock interrupted his search. Immediately resuming his amnesiac persona, he called out a hesitant, "Come in." The door opened to reveal Sophia Oliveira, dressed in civilian clothes, simple jeans and a blue blouse that made her look younger, less institutional. She carried a small suitcase and a medical bag. "Good afternoon, Mr. Cavalcanti," she said professionally. "How are you settling in?" "It's overwhelming," he replied, gesturing vaguely at the opulent surroundings. "Nothing feels familiar." Sophia nodded, setting down her bags. Her eyes darted briefly to where he'd found the transmitter, then back to his face, her expression revealing nothing. "That's to be expected," she said, her voice caring for any hidden microphones. "Recovery isn't linear. We'll start with some simple cognitive exercises to help reorient you." She removed a folder from her bag, then casually reached for the sound system remote, turning on classical music at a low volume. Under the cover of Bach's concertos, she leaned closer to check his healing head wound, her lips near his ear. "Your home is bugged," she whispered, her fingers gently probing his scalp. "At least in this room." Mateus maintained his confused expression, though his pulse quickened. "Is it normal to feel so disoriented?" he asked loudly. "Completely normal," Sophia assured him at regular volume, before whispering again. "I overheard Clara and Henrique at the hospital. They're planning something with your company. A merger?" Mateus closed his eyes briefly, processing this confirmation of his suspicions. When he opened them, he found Sophia watching him intently, professional distance momentarily replaced by genuine concern. "Why help me?" he murmured, dropping the stutter just for a moment. Sophia's hands stilled in their examination. "I've seen what happens when vulnerable patients are exploited by those who should protect them," she whispered fiercely. "My sister." She stopped, composing herself. "Let's just say I recognize predators when I see them." Before Mateus could respond, the door opened without a knock. Clara stood in the doorway, her smile brittle as she took in their proximity. "I see Nurse Oliveira has arrived," she said coolly. "How fortunate that you were available on such short notice." Sophia straightened, professional mask firmly in place. "Mr. Cavalcanti's recovery is my priority. I've developed a rehabilitation program specifically tailored to his condition." "How dedicated," Clara replied, the word dripping with insinuation. "Well, I won't interrupt your examination. Mateus, lunch will be served on the terrace in 30 minutes. Nurse Oliveira is welcome to join us, of course." After Clara departed, Sophia resumed her assessment, the music still playing softly in the background. "She suspects something," Sophia whispered, checking Mateus's reflexes with clinical precision. "Good," Mateus replied quietly. "Let her wonder. It'll make her careless." Sophia frowned. "This is dangerous, Mr. Cavalcanti. If they're willing to steal your company, what else might they do?" "It's Mateus," he corrected softly. "And danger goes both ways." Lunch on the terrace was an exercise in restraint. Clara presided at the head of the table like a queen holding court, while Mateus played the role of confused invalid to perfection, dropping his napkin, fumbling with cutlery, and peppering her with innocent questions about their life together. "So we met at a charity gala?" he asked, watching her carefully. Clara smiled, the practiced expression never reaching her eyes. "Yes, for children's cancer research. Your pharmaceutical company was the main sponsor. You spilled champagne on my dress, then insisted on buying me a new one." "How romantic," Sophia commented neutrally, her focus on cutting her fish into precise pieces. Clara's smile tightened imperceptibly. "Mateus has always been impulsive when something catches his interest. Isn't that right, darling?" Mateus blinked innocently. "I wouldn't know." An uncomfortable silence fell, broken by the arrival of Rodriguez announcing a visitor. "Mr. Tavares is here to see you, sir." Clara brightened immediately. "Henrique. Perfect timing. Mateus, Henrique is your best friend and business partner. You've known each other since university." Henrique strode onto the terrace with casual confidence, designer sunglasses pushed up into his perfectly styled hair. "Mateus, good to see you home, brother." Mateus tensed inwardly at the false camaraderie but maintained his confused exterior. "Hello." Henrique's smile faltered slightly at the lukewarm reception before he recovered, turning to greet Clara with a kiss on each cheek that lingered a moment too long. Clara, radiant as always. His eyes then slid to Sophia, assessment and dismissal in a single glance. "And the dedicated nurse, how committed you are to your patient." Sophia met his gaze evenly. "Mr. Cavalcanti's recovery requires consistent professional care." Of course," Henrique said with a wave of his hand, pulling up a chair uninvited. "But surely you can spare him for a brief business meeting. Some urgent company matters require attention." "I don't think," Sophia began. "Actually," Clara interrupted, "the doctor encouraged mental stimulation. Perhaps hearing about the business might trigger some memories." Mateus glanced between them, noting the silent communication passing between Clara and Henrique. "What kind of business matters?" Henrique leaned forward eagerly. "Nothing too taxing. Just a merger we've been planning for months. Your baby, really. Cavalcanti Pharmaceuticals joining forces with my biotech firm to create the largest pharmaceutical conglomerate in South America." "My baby?" Mateus repeated, deliberately sounding lost. "You were so excited about it," Clara added, her hand covering his on the table. "You said it would revolutionize the industry, bring life-saving drugs to market faster." Mateus withdrew his hand on the pretense of reaching for water, buying time to think. The merger was news to him. There had been preliminary discussions 6 months ago, but he'd rejected Henrique's proposal after finding concerning irregularities in the biotech firm's research protocols. "It sounds important," he said carefully. "Crucial," Henrique emphasized. "But nothing needs to be decided today. I've brought some documents for you to look over when you feel up to it, just background information to refresh your memory." Sophia cleared her throat. "As Mr. Cavalcanti's healthcare provider, I must advise against overwhelming him with complex business decisions during early recovery. Cognitive rest is essential after traumatic brain injury." Henrique's charming facade slipped momentarily, irritation flashing in his eyes. "With all due respect, Nurse Oliveira, there are significant time constraints with mergers of this scale. Investors are waiting, stock prices are affected." "My patient's health supersedes business concerns," Sophia cut in firmly. "Perhaps," Clara interjected smoothly, "Mateus could simply review the information. No decisions, no pressure, just familiarization." Mateus watched the power struggle with concealed fascination. Sophia was holding her ground against two formidable opponents, her quiet authority a stark contrast to their practiced manipulation. "I'd like to try," he said, adding a nervous quaver to his voice, "if it might help me remember." Sophia studied him for a moment, understanding passing between them. "Very well, but only for 30 minutes, and I'll be monitoring for signs of cognitive fatigue." Henrique's triumphant smile didn't reach his eyes. "Excellent. I have the files in my car. I'll just go fetch them." As Henrique departed, Clara excused herself to take a phone call, leaving Mateus and Sophia alone on the terrace. "You're playing a dangerous game," Sophia murmured, once Clara was out of earshot. "So are they," Mateus replied softly. "I need to see those documents. The merger was never approved. Sophia nodded almost imperceptibly. I'll create a distraction later. You'll have maybe 10 minutes. Perfect, Mateus said, then louder as Clara returned. I'm feeling a bit tired already. Clara's concern seemed genuine, or at least genuinely calculated. Perhaps this is too much too soon. No, Mateus insisted. I want to try. Henrique returned with a sleek leather portfolio. Just some basic information about the merger. Take your time. For the next half hour, Mateus played his role perfectly, squinting at documents with exaggerated confusion, asking basic questions that allowed Henrique to paint the merger as a long-planned triumph rather than the hostile takeover it clearly was. The documents revealed what he'd suspected. Under the merger terms, Henrique would become CEO of the combined entity, while Mateus would be relegated to a figurehead chairman position with minimal voting rights. This all looks very professional, Mateus commented, deliberately underwhelming in his praise. Henrique chuckled. Well, you always were the visionary, I just handled the details. Sophia, who had been silently observing, stood up. I think that's enough for today. Mr. Cavalcanti needs to rest before his physical therapy session. Of course, Henrique agreed too readily. I'll leave these with you, Mateus. Maybe they'll spark some memories overnight. After Henrique and Clara escorted them inside, Sophia guided Mattis to his room for what was ostensibly a rest period. Once inside, with music playing again, she spoke urgently. They've accelerated their timeline. The merger documents are dated for next week. Mateus nodded grimly. I need access to my office. There's evidence there of why I originally rejected the merger. They'll be watching your every move, Sophia warned. Not if I'm having a medical emergency, Mateus replied, a plan forming in his mind. Tomorrow night, I'll need to have a setback in my recovery. Sophia's eyes widened. What kind of setback? The kind that gets me back to the hospital, Mateus said, where the CEO of Cavalcanti Pharmaceuticals keeps a private office for emergencies. Sophia looked uncertain. That's extremely risky. So, is trusting the wrong people, Mateus countered. Why are you helping me, really? Sophia was silent for a long moment, her usually composed expression faltering. 2 years ago, my sister was married to a pharmaceutical executive. When she discovered financial irregularities in his company, he made her doubt her own sanity. Gaslighting, they call it. By the time she gathered the courage to leave, he'd isolated her completely. She took her own life 3 months later. Mattis felt the weight of her words, seeing beneath her professional exterior to the pain that drove her. I'm sorry. The point is, Sophia continued, her voice strengthening, I've seen what happens when powerful people are allowed to manipulate others unchecked. Your fiancé and friend, they have the same look in their eyes. Before Mattis could respond, a soft knock sounded at the door. Sophia quickly resumed checking his vital signs as Clara entered without waiting for a response. How's our patient? She asked, her tone solicitous though her eyes were sharp with suspicion. Fatigued, as expected, Sophia replied professionally. I've scheduled physical therapy for later this afternoon, but he needs rest now. Clara approached the bed, sitting beside Mateus and taking his hand. I've been thinking, darling, perhaps we should postpone our wedding until you're fully recovered. No pressure, no rush. Something in her tone alerted Mateus. This wasn't concern, it was calculation. If the merger went through before the wedding, she wouldn't need to marry him at all. That's thoughtful, he replied, squeezing her hand with just enough pressure to see her flinch imperceptibly. But I'd like to keep our D-date. Something to look forward to. Clara's smile froze. But darling, you don't even remember our engagement. Then help me remember, Mateus challenged softly. Tell me everything, how I proposed, what we've planned, every detail. Clara faltered, just for a second before recovering. Of course, my love, but not now. You need your rest. She kissed his forehead and rose gracefully. I'll check on you later. As the door closed behind her, Mateus turned to Sophia with grim satisfaction. She doesn't know the details because she was never interested in them. Just the status and money that came with being Mrs. Cavalcanti. Sophia's expression was troubled. What happens when she realizes you're testing her? By then, Mateus said, his stutter completely gone, as he swung his legs over the bed and stood with unexpected steadiness, I'll have everything I need to expose them both. That evening, As sunset painted the ocean in fiery hues, Matthias stood alone on the balcony of his bedroom, a tumbler of whiskey untouched in his hand. The familiar burn of betrayal had settled into cold determination. Tomorrow would set events in motion that couldn't be reversed. A soft knock at the balcony door interrupted his thoughts. Sophia stepped. Outside, a manila folder clutched to her chest. "I thought you'd want to see this," she said, handing him the folder. "I found it while setting up the medication station in your study. It was hidden behind a medical reference book." Matthias opened the folder to find lab reports from Cavalcanti Pharmaceuticals' research division, dated 6 months earlier. His eyes widened as he scanned the contents. "These are the clinical trial results that made me reject the merger. Henrique's flagship drug showed liver toxicity in 30% of test subjects. He falsified the results to get regulatory approval," Sophia said quietly. "According to these notes, you confronted him about it." Matthias nodded slowly, memories crystallizing. "He claimed it was a statistical anomaly. I gave him 3 months to reproduce the trials with stricter protocols." He looked up at Sophia, his expression hardening. "He never did." Sophia glanced over her shoulder nervously. "If they catch me with these—" "They won't," Matthias assured her, slipping the documents into his robe. "Tomorrow night, after my episode, I need you to get me to the hospital office without Clara or Henrique knowing." Sophia bit her lip, uncertainty crossing her features. "What will you do then?" "What I should have done months ago," Matthias replied grimly. "Expose Henrique's fraud and Clara's complicity." A comfortable silence fell between them as they gazed out at the darkening horizon. Standing side by side, Matthias was acutely aware of Sophia's presence, not merely as an ally in his scheme, but as a woman whose courage and integrity had become a lifeline in a sea of deception. "You never really answered my question earlier," he said softly. "Why risk everything to help someone you barely know?" Sophia turned to him, the fading light catching in her eyes. "Because sometimes doing the right thing means taking the hardest path, and because," she hesitated, vulnerability briefly replacing her professional composure, "because I recognize something in you, even through your pretense. A determination to find truth, no matter the cost." Their eyes locked, a current of understanding passing between them that transcended words. In that moment, standing with someone who saw him, truly saw him, beyond wealth and status and pretense, Matthias felt a connection he had never experienced with Clara, despite years together. Sophia broke the spell, stepping back with a return to professional distance. "You should rest. Tomorrow will require all your strength." As she turned to leave, Matthias caught her hand. "Sophia." Her name felt right on his lips, without pretense or stutter. "Thank you." She smiled, a genuine expression that transformed her serious features. "Save your thanks for when we succeed, Mr. Cavalcanti." "Matthias," he corrected gently. "Matthias," she echoed before slipping back inside, leaving him alone with the night and the dangerous game that would resume with the dawn. Below, on the garden path, unseen in the gathering darkness, Clara stood frozen, her face illuminated by the blue glow of her phone. On the screen, a surveillance app displayed Matthias and Sophia in crystal-clear video, their intimate moment captured from the hidden camera in the balcony lighting. "So," she whispered, her beautiful features contorting with rage, "the amnesiac remembers after all." She punched a number into her phone, her voice ice-cold when Henrique answered. "We have a problem, both of them. Move up the timeline. Tomorrow." Morning light filtered through the blinds as Matthias reviewed his plan one final time. The evidence hidden in his hospital office would expose Henrique's fraud and Clara's complicity, but getting there required perfect timing and execution. Tonight, he would fake a seizure severe enough to warrant hospitalization, giving him access to his private office in the hospital's executive wing. It was risky, but with Sophia's help, it could work. A knock at the bedroom door interrupted his thoughts. He quickly resumed his amnesiac posture, hunching slightly and allowing confusion to cloud his features. Come in," he called, the rehearsed stutter falling easily from his lips. The door opened to reveal not Sophia as he expected, but Clara, radiant in a cream designer suit, her smile brittle but determined. Behind her stood Henrique and a man Matthias didn't recognize. Middle-aged, bespectacled, with the practiced neutrality of a medical professional. "Good morning, darling," Clara said, her voice honey-sweet. I've brought Dr. Barreto to see you. He's a specialist in neurological recovery. Mateus felt a prickle of unease. Where is Nurse Oliveira? I've given her the morning off, Clara replied smoothly. You've been making such wonderful progress. I thought a specialist's assessment was in order. Dr. Barreto stepped forward, extending his hand. Mr. Cavalcanti, a pleasure. I'd like to run a few cognitive tests if you don't mind. Mateus reluctantly shook the doctor's hand, noting the firm grip and assessing gaze. This man was no ordinary physician. Of course. For the next 30 minutes, Dr. Barreto subjected Mateus to a battery of tests far more rigorous than Dr. Mendez had administered. Questions designed to trap him in inconsistencies, memory exercises with subtle clues only someone faking would notice. Mateus recognized the strategy. This was an evaluation to determine whether his amnesia was genuine. Very good, Mr. Cavalcanti, Dr. Barreto said finally, making notes in a leather-bound journal. Just one more test. I'd like to try a new technique that's shown promising results with amnesia patients. From his medical bag, he withdrew a small case containing a syringe and vial. This is a mild psychoactive compound that temporarily enhances neural pathways associated with memory retrieval. Alarm bells rang in Mateus's mind. Is this a approved treatment? Experimental, Dr. Barreto admitted, but with excellent results in similar cases. Completely safe, I assure you. Henrique stepped forward, his concern obviously feigned. Mateus, buddy, I've researched this thoroughly. It could be the breakthrough you need. Clara sat beside Mateus on the bed, taking his hand. Darling, don't you want to remember our life together? Our plans? Mateus looked between the three faces surrounding him. Clara's calculated desperation, Henrique's barely concealed eagerness, Dr. Barreto's clinical detachment. The truth hit him with alarming clarity. This wasn't treatment, it was an interrogation drug. They knew he was faking. I'm not sure, he stammered, mind racing for a way out. Perhaps we should consult with Dr. Mendez first. Dr. Barreto was already preparing the injection. I've reviewed your case with Dr. Mendez. He's in full agreement. Mateus tried to rise, but Clara's hand tightened on his arm with surprising strength. It's for your own good, darling. The bedroom door burst open, and Sophia stood in the threshold, her chest heaving as if she'd run the entire way. Her eyes quickly assessed the scene, widening at the sight of the syringe. What's happening here? She demanded, professional authority cutting through the tension. Dr. Barreto straightened. Nurse Oliveira, I presume. I'm administering a memory-enhancing treatment. Without consulting me, Mr. Cavalcanti's primary care provider? Sophia's voice was steel wrapped in silk as she strode into the room. What compound is that exactly? A proprietary blend, Dr. Barreto hedged, which means unauthorized and potentially dangerous, Sophia replied coldly, positioning herself between Mateus and the doctor. I'll need to see documented approval from the Hospital Ethics Board and Mr. Cavalcanti's signed consent form. Clara stood, her facade cracking slightly. This is ridiculous. We're trying to help Mateus recover. Why are you interfering? Because it's my job to protect my patient, Sophia replied evenly. Dr. Barreto, please pack up your equipment and leave. Any further treatment must be approved through proper medical channels. Dr. Barreto glanced at Henrique, who gave an almost imperceptible nod. Very well, the doctor conceded, returning the syringe to his case. But I must emphasize that you're delaying Mr. Cavalcanti's recovery. As the doctor packed his bag, Sophia turned to Mateus, performing a quick assessment of his vital signs. Are you all right? She asked softly, her back to the others. They know, he whispered, barely moving his lips. Sophia's expression remained neutral, but her eyes conveyed understanding. Mr. Cavalcanti needs rest now, she announced firmly. I must ask everyone to leave. I'd like a word with you first. Nurse Oliveira, Clara said, her tone leaving no room for negotiation. In private. Sophia nodded once. Of course. As they exited, Henrique lingered in the doorway. We're only trying to help Mateus. Remember that. The threat beneath his words was unmistakable. When the door closed behind them, Mateus moved swiftly to his nightstand, retrieving a small recorder he'd hidden there the previous night. If their plan was compromised, he needed backup options. He pressed his ear to the door, straining to hear Clara's conversation with Sophia in the hallway. Questioning your professionalism, Nurse Oliveira, Clara was saying, her voice a controlled hiss. But your attachment to my fiancé has become inappropriate. My only attachment is to my patient's well-being, Sophia replied evenly. Let me be clear, Clara continued. Your services are no longer required. You'll be compensated generously for your time, but I expect you to leave the premises immediately. I was hired by the hospital at Mr. Cavalcanti's request, Sophia countered. Only he can terminate my assignment. Don't test me. Clara's voice dropped dangerously. People in your position should be careful about making powerful enemies. Is that a threat, Miss Sampaio? Consider it friendly advice. You have 1 hour to pack your things. Footsteps receded down the hallway, and moments later, the bedroom door opened. Sophia entered, her composed expression belied by the tension in her shoulders. They're moving faster than we anticipated, she said quietly, checking for surveillance devices. That wasn't a legitimate doctor, was it? Matthias shook his head. Most likely someone from Henrique's security team with medical training. The drug was probably sodium pentothal or something similar. A truth serum? Sophia's eyes widened. They're more desperate than I thought. Or more certain, Matthias countered grimly. They wouldn't risk that unless they were already convinced I'm faking. We need to accelerate our timeline. Sophia glanced at her watch. Clara's given me an hour to leave. Perfect, Matthias said, his mind racing. Instead of waiting until tonight, my episode happens now, while you're still here. We use the emergency as cover to get to the hospital. Sophia considered this, then nodded decisively. I'll need to make it convincing. Are you ready? Matthias took a deep breath. Do it. Sophia moved to the door and flung it open. Help, she shouted, her voice pitched with professional urgency. Mr. Ray, Cavalcanti is having a seizure. Call an ambulance. The mansion erupted into chaos. Matthias thrashed on the bed, foam from a hastily bitten capsule Sophia had given him bubbling at his lips. His limbs jerked in convincing spasms as Sophia stabilized his head, calling out medical jargon to the staff who rushed into the room. Clara appeared in the doorway, her face a mask of shock. What happened? She demanded. Possible complication from his head trauma, Sophia replied tersely, checking Matthias's pulse. I need a medical transport team now. Within minutes, paramedics arrived, loading Matthias onto a stretcher. Sophia rattled off vital signs and medical history, with practiced efficiency as they wheeled him down the hallway. Clara followed, her phone pressed to her ear, presumably calling Henrique. I'm coming with him, Clara insisted as they reached the ambulance. There's only room for 1 medical personnel, Sophia countered. You can follow in your car. Before Clara could object further, Sophia climbed into the ambulance beside Matthias, the doors closing firmly behind her. As the ambulance pulled away from the mansion, Matthias allowed his seizure to gradually subside. Phase 1 complete, he murmured when they were safely away from the estate. Sophia checked his vitals with genuine concern. That was convincing, too convincing. Your heart rate spiked dangerously. Method acting, Matthias replied with a wry smile. How long before we reach the hospital? 20 minutes, Sophia said, glancing at the paramedics who were too busy with their equipment to overhear. Once there, we'll have maybe 10 minutes before Clara arrives. Then we'd better make them count. São Paulo Memorial Hospital's executive wing stood in stark contrast to the clinical environment of the main facility. Plush carpeting, subdued lighting, and original artwork created an atmosphere more suited to a luxury hotel than a medical institution. Matthias had insisted on maintaining a private office here, ostensibly for hospital board meetings, but primarily as a secure location for sensitive documents. Using the confusion of his arrival at the emergency department, Matthias and Sophia slipped away down a service corridor, her scrubs and his patient wristband providing sufficient cover. They reached the executive wing without incident, Matthias leading the way despite his supposed amnesia. Security code? Sophia asked as they reached a keypad-protected door. 8675, Matthias replied, punching in the numbers. Clara never bothered to learn it. The office beyond was elegant but functional. A large desk dominated the space, with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and a small conference table. Matthias moved immediately to the desk, pressing a hidden panel that revealed a fingerprint scanner. Biometric safe, he explained, placing his thumb on the scanner. A soft click signaled the release of a hidden drawer. Henrique doesn't know about this. From the drawer, he retrieved a USB drive and a file folder. Everything we need is here. Original clinical trial data, evidence of Henrique's falsified reports and documentation of previous merger discussions where I explicitly rejected his proposal. Sophia glanced nervously at her watch. We've got maybe 5 minutes before Clara realizes we're not in the ER. One more thing, Mateus said, moving to the computer and inserting the USB drive. I need to send this evidence to my lawyer and the regulatory authorities. His fingers flew over the keyboard, attaching documents to encrypted emails. There's a whistleblower protection clause in my contract. Once these emails are sent, neither Clara nor Henrique can legally touch my shares or position until an investigation is complete. Just as he pressed send, the office door burst open. Clara stood in the threshold, her perfect composure shattered, face contorted with rage. Behind her loomed Henrique, his usual charm replaced by cold calculation. I knew it, Clara spat, stalking into the room. The devoted nurse and the amnesiac billionaire conspiring behind my back. Mateus straightened, dropping all pretense of confusion or weakness. His stutter vanished as he faced them. Game over, Clara. I've sent everything to the authorities, the falsified drug trials, the fraudulent merger documents, all of it. Henrique stepped forward, his voice dangerously calm. You've made a serious mistake, Mateus. Do you really think anyone will believe your accusations over the word of 2 respected business leaders? Especially coming from a man with documented brain damage? The evidence speaks for itself, Mateus replied evenly. Your flagship drug failed its clinical trials. 30% liver toxicity isn't a statistical anomaly. It's a death sentence for patients. You were willing to put thousands of lives at risk for profit. Henrique's facade cracked slightly. You self-righteous hypocrite. Do you have any idea how much money was at stake? How many investors were counting on that drug? So you decided to take my company instead, Mateus concluded. With Clara's help. Clara laughed, the sound brittle and cold. You made it so easy, Mateus, so trusting, so convinced of my devotion. Did you really think someone like me could love someone like you without an incentive? The words struck deeper than Mateus expected, despite knowing her true nature. 3 years of what he'd believed was love reduced to a business transaction. What I don't understand, he said quietly, is why the charade? Why continue with wedding plans when you were planning to take everything anyway? Clara's smile was venomous. Insurance. A wife has certain legal rights that a fiancé doesn't. If the merger somehow failed, I'd still get my share in the divorce. Sophia had remained silent during the confrontation, but now she stepped forward. It's over. Security is already on their way. Henrique's expression shifted from anger to calculation. Is it over? Clara, show them. Clara reached into her handbag, withdrawing a small tablet. She tapped the screen, then turned it to face them. On the display was a video of Mateus and Sophia on the balcony the previous evening, their intimate conversation clearly audible. You've been lying about your condition, Clara said triumphantly. Conspiring against your own fiancé. I wonder how the board will react to this evidence of your mental instability. A man so paranoid he fakes amnesia to test his loved ones? Mateus felt a flicker of doubt. She was right. The video could be damaging, casting doubt on his reliability and judgment. But before he could respond, Sophia stepped forward. That video also proves you were illegally surveilling Mr. Cavalcanti, she pointed out, and it captures his legitimate concerns about corporate fraud. If anything, it strengthens his case. Clara's confidence wavered slightly. It's your word against ours, and we have something you don't. Control of the Cavalcanti Pharmaceuticals board. Not anymore, came a new voice from the doorway. All heads turned to see Rodriguez, Mateus's house manager, standing with a distinguished older man in an impeccable suit. Mr. Silva, Mateus said, recognizing his company's legal counsel. Right on time. Silva nodded gravely. When Rodriguez contacted me with concerns about your condition, I began reviewing the merger documents. The discrepancies were troubling. This is absurd, Henrique blustered. You have no authority. As chief legal counsel and acting secretary of the board, Silva interrupted coldly. I have every authority to investigate potential fraud. The emails Mr. Cavalcanti just sent merely confirmed what we already suspected. Clara's composure crumbled entirely. You can't possibly believe him. He's been lying, manipulating everyone. The only manipulation, Sophia said quietly, has been yours, Miss Sampaio, and Mr. Tavares's. Security personnel appeared behind Silva, their presence a silent statement of authority. "Mr. Tavares, Miss Sampaio," Silva said formally, "I suggest you cooperate fully with the coming investigation. The company will be pressing charges for attempted corporate fraud, among other things." Clara's face drained of color as the reality of her situation dawned. Her gaze locked with Mateus's, hatred and desperation warring in her eyes. "This isn't over," she hissed. "You'll regret this." "The only thing I regret," Mateus replied evenly, "is not seeing you for what you were 3 years ago." As security escorted Clara and Henrique from the office, an oppressive weight lifted from Mateus's shoulders. The immediate danger had passed, but the betrayal's sting remained. Silva approached, concern evident in his weathered features. "Are you all right, sir?" Rodriguez explained about the amnesia ruse. "I'm fine," Mateus assured him. "Thanks to Sofia and Rodriguez, your timing was impeccable." Silva nodded respectfully toward Sofia. "The company owes you a debt of gratitude, Miss Oliveira." Sofia shook her head. "I was just doing my job." "Far beyond your job," Mateus corrected gently. He turned back to Silva. "What happens now?" "The regulatory authorities have been notified about the falsified drug trials," Silva explained. "Trading of company stock has been temporarily suspended pending investigation. There will be media attention, unavoidably." Mateus nodded grimly. "Prepare a press statement outlining our full cooperation with authorities. Transparency is essential." "Of course, sir." Silva paused, then added, "The board is called an emergency meeting for tomorrow morning. They'll want a full explanation." "They'll get one," Mateus promised. "Is there anything else that can't wait until tomorrow?" Silva glanced briefly at Sofia, then back to Mateus. "Nothing that can't wait, sir. I'll handle things until then." After Silva departed, Mateus slumped into his desk chair, the adrenaline of confrontation giving way to bone-deep exhaustion. The plan had worked. Clara and Henrique were exposed, the company secured, but victory felt hollow in the wake of such profound betrayal. Sofia approached cautiously. "You should rest. You've been through a lot." Mateus looked up at her, this woman who had risked everything to help him. "Why did you do it? Really?" Sofia was quiet for a long moment, her professional mask slipping to reveal genuine emotion. "Because when I look at you, I don't see Mateus Cavalcanti the billionaire. I see someone who values truth above comfort, integrity above convenience." She paused, a vulnerability in her expression that hadn't been there before. "And because I recognize in you the same pain my sister carried, the agony of betrayal by those closest to you." Mateus reached for her hand, a simple gesture of gratitude that somehow carried more meaning than intended. "Thank you seems inadequate." "Then don't thank me," Sofia replied softly. "Just don't let this break you. Don't let them win by becoming as cynical as they are." A knock at the door interrupted the moment. Rodriguez entered, his usual stoic expression softened with concern. "The car is ready when you are, sir. I've prepared the guest house as you requested." "Guest house?" Sofia questioned. "I can't go back to the mansion," Mateus explained. "Too many memories, too many lies. The guest property is more modest, more honest." "A wise choice, sir," Rodriguez agreed. "Will Nurse Oliveira be continuing your care?" The question hung in the air, weighted with unspoken possibilities. Mateus looked to Sofia, suddenly uncertain. "That depends on Nurse Oliveira. Her official assignment has been completed." Sofia met his gaze steadily. "I think the patient still requires monitoring, at least for a few days." Something shifted between them in that moment, a recognition of possibilities beyond patient and nurse, beyond conspiracy and crisis. Mateus felt it like a physical current, this connection that had formed in the crucible of deception. "Then it's settled," he said softly. Rodriguez nodded, a knowing glint in his eyes as he withdrew, leaving them alone once more. "What now?" Sofia asked, the question encompassing far more than the immediate future. Mateus rose from his chair, exhaustion momentarily forgotten as he faced this woman who had become his unexpected salvation. "Now we figure out what's real." The guest house perched on a cliff overlooking the wild Atlantic, a modernist glass and wood structure far more modest than the mansion but stunning in its simplicity. As the car pulled up the winding drive, the setting sun painted the ocean in molten gold, a beauty that seemed at odds with the day's turmoil. Rodriguez ushered them inside, where a simple dinner awaited. "I've stocked the refrigerator and prepared the 2 guest rooms," he informed them. Will there be anything else, sir? No, thank you, Rodriguez. Mateus replied warmly. You've done more than enough today. With a respectful nod, Rodriguez departed, leaving Mateus and Sofia in a silence that felt both comfortable and charged with unspoken thoughts. It's beautiful, Sofia said finally, moving to the wall of windows overlooking the ocean. It's the only property I have that Clara never visited, Mateus admitted, joining her at the window. She found it too isolated, too simple. Sofia turned to study his face. And what do you find it? Honest, he replied simply. No pretense, no facade, just exactly what it appears to be. The double meaning hung between them as they stood side by side, watching the last light fade from the sky. Their reflections in the glass, a man finally free of deception, a woman who had risked everything to help him, overlapped with the darkening horizon. You don't stutter anymore, Sofia observed quietly. Matthias smiled ruefully. No need for pretense now. I liked it, in a strange way, she admitted. It made you seem more human, he suggested. Vulnerable, she corrected. Approachable. Matthias turned to face her fully, the distance between them suddenly charged with awareness. Is that what you want? Vulnerability? Sofia met his gaze unflinchingly. I want authenticity. After what you've been through, what we've both been through, nothing less seems worth the risk. The honesty of her answer struck him deeply. In a world where he had learned to doubt every motive, every word, her straightforward truth was revolutionary. I don't know who I am anymore, he confessed. 3 years with someone who never loved me, never saw me. It makes me question everything. Sofia's hand found his, a touch so different from Clara's calculated affection. Then discover who you are, without the expectations, without the personas. And you? Matthias asked, his voice low. What will you do now? Sofia withdrew her hand, creating necessary distance. My assignment is over. Professionally speaking, I should return to the hospital, take on a new patient. And personally speaking? Sofia's smile held a mixture of sadness and possibility. Personally, I'm standing in a beautiful house with a man I barely know but somehow trust, wondering if timing is everything or just an excuse. Matthias felt something shift in his chest. A broken piece settling into a new configuration, not healed, but realigning into something that might eventually become whole. Stay, he said simply. Not as my nurse. Not for any reason, except that I'd like to know who Sofia Oliveira is, beyond the professional competence and unexpected courage. Sofia looked out at the darkened ocean, waves now visible only as white foam against the night. I have a shift tomorrow morning. After that, Mateus clarified. Dinner. Just dinner and conversation. Just dinner, she echoed, a question in her tone. And maybe the truth about what happens when two people meet under impossible circumstances and discover something possible. Sofia turned back to him, moonlight illuminating half her face while shadow claimed the rest. A visual metaphor for the woman herself, part professional distance, part unveiled emotion. I'll think about it, she promised. As they stood together in comfortable silence, watching the moonlight on the waves, Matthias realized that for the first time in weeks, perhaps years, he was exactly where he wanted to be, with exactly who he wanted to be with. The journey ahead was uncertain, the wounds still fresh, but in this moment of quiet connection, he found something he had thought lost forever. Hope. Outside the guest house, Clara sat in her parked car on the coastal road, watching the two silhouettes through high-powered binoculars. Her immaculate appearance had deteriorated, mascara streaked from angry tears, hair disheveled from running nervous hands through it. Beside her on the passenger seat lay legal papers detailing the freeze on her assets, preliminary charges, and a restraining order barring her from contacting Mattis. Enjoy your moment of triumph, she whispered, her voice raw with hatred. It won't last. Her phone chimed with a message from Henrique. Plan B in motion. Meet at the airstrip in 2 hours. Clara started the engine, casting one final venomous glance at the illuminated house on the cliff. This isn't over, Mateus. Not by a long shot. As she pulled away, her tires spraying gravel, she failed to notice the security vehicle parked discreetly among the trees, or the camera lens that captured her presence, sending a silent alert to Rodriguez's phone inside the main house. The game had ended, but a more dangerous one was just beginning. 1 week after the confrontation, Mateus stood before the Cavalcanti Pharmaceuticals board. his testimony concluding the emergency session that would decide the company's future. "The evidence is irrefutable," he stated firmly. Henrique Tavares falsified clinical trial data that would have revealed dangerous side effects in patients. "When I discovered this 6 months ago, he conspired with Clara Sampaio to seize control of the company through fraudulent means." The boardroom remained silent as Silva distributed the final evidence packets, bank records showing payments to Clara dating back 2 years, communication between the conspirators, and the original clinical trial data. "Mr. Cavalcanti," the board chairman said finally, "your actions, while unorthodox, have saved this company from potentially devastating legal and ethical consequences. The board unanimously votes to reinstate you as CEO with full authority." As the meeting adjourned, Mateus felt oddly detached from the victory. Outside the boardroom, Rodriguez waited with an urgent message. "Sir, Miss Oliveira called. There's been a development at the guest house." When Mateus arrived, he found Sofia in the living room with 2 federal agents. "They've found them," she said without preamble. "Clara and Henrique were intercepted at a private airstrip in Uruguay. They were attempting to flee to a non-extradition country." The lead agent nodded confirmation. "We also discovered they had transferred nearly $50 million to offshore accounts. The funds have been frozen pending investigation." "And what happens now?" Mateus asked. "They'll be extradited to face multiple charges: corporate fraud, conspiracy, theft of proprietary information. With the evidence you've provided, they're looking at significant prison time." After the agents departed, a heavy silence fell between Mateus and Sofia. "So it's really over," she said quietly. Mateus moved to the windows overlooking the ocean. "The crisis is over. The aftermath," he shrugged, "that may take longer." Sofia joined him, maintaining a professional distance that felt increasingly artificial. "Your recovery is progressing well, physically at least." "And my other recovery? From having my life shattered by betrayal?" "What's your professional assessment?" Sofia smiled sadly. "That's beyond my medical expertise." "But not beyond your human experience," Mateus countered, turning to face her. The tension between them, part professional boundary, part undeniable attraction, had only intensified over the past week of cohabitation. Sofia had maintained her role as his nurse, while they both pretended the connection between them was imaginary. "My sister never recovered," Sofia admitted. "She let the betrayal define her." "And you?" Sofia hesitated. "I built walls, safer to keep people at a distance than risk being hurt. And now? Now I'm wondering if some risks are worth taking." Her professional mask slipped, revealing vulnerability beneath. "My assignment officially ended yesterday. I've been cleared to return to regular hospital duties." Mateus felt a tightening in his chest. "And will you?" "That depends," Sofia said softly, "on whether there's a reason to stay." The moment stretched between them, years of caution warring with the undeniable pull they'd felt since the beginning. "I can't offer certainty," Mateus said honestly. "I'm still putting the pieces back together. But I know that when you're here, the world makes more sense. The broken parts don't seem so irreparable." Sofia's smile transformed her usually serious features. "Then perhaps we build something new, something neither of us has had before. Something honest." Mateus closed the distance between them, taking her hand in his. "I'd like that. No pretenses, no masks, just us, discovering who we might be together." "Just us," Sofia agreed, her free hand reaching up to touch his face. No stutter required. Their laughter mingled as Mateus pulled her closer. Their first kiss was gentle, tentative, not an ending but a beginning. 1 year later. The charity gala buzzed with São Paulo's elite, champagne flowing as freely as the donations for children's cancer research. At the center of it all stood Mateus Cavalcanti, now more comfortable in his role as philanthropist than he'd ever been as a ruthless CEO. The past year had transformed both him and Cavalcanti Pharmaceuticals. The company had weathered the scandal and emerged stronger, with a renewed focus on ethical research and development. Clara and Henrique had been convicted on multiple charges, their sentences a clear message to the corporate world about the consequences of fraud. More importantly, Mateus had found his way back to himself, not the person he'd been before Clara, but someone stronger, wiser, more authentic. "There you are," Sofia said, appearing at his side in an elegant blue gown that complemented rather than defined her. She was still working at the hospital, having refused his offer of a foundation directorship. "I still prefer scrubs," she'd explained, "and helping people who need it most." "Just getting some air," Mateos replied, tucking her hand into the crook of his arm. "Too many people asking about wedding plans." Sophia laughed. "Let them wonder. We'll do it our way, in our time." Their engagement, announced a month earlier, had surprised no one who knew them. Their path from conspiracy to love wasn't conventional, but it was undeniably theirs. "I saw the patient from your amnesia ward today," Sophia mentioned. "The one with the actual memory loss." "How is he?" "Getting better. His wife visits every day. 40 years of marriage, and she still looks at him like he hung the moon." Mateus smiled. "That's what I want. Decades from now, still discovering new reasons to fall in love with you." "Even when I snore?" Sophia teased. "Especially then," he laughed, drawing her closer as they gazed out at the same city skyline where their story had begun a year earlier. "It's real. That's what matters." In the ballroom behind them, life continued. Music played, champagne flowed, connections formed and dissolved. But on the quiet balcony, two people who had found each other through deception stood in perfect honesty, their shattered pasts rebuilt into something neither had dared to imagine. A future made stronger by its broken places, more beautiful for having been rebuilt with care, patience, and love. Like the Japanese art of kintsugi, repairing broken pottery with gold, the cracks in their lives hadn't been hidden, but honored, filled with something precious that made the whole more valuable than it had been before. And in that, they had found their truth.